Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're going to be talking about Week 1's preseason standouts. I'm going to be going over all 16 games that took place in Week 1 of the NFL's preseason and giving you my thoughts on the fantasy implications of specific players as we progress and we get closer to the 2019 fantasy football season. So, before we get into that, let me remind all of you, if you haven't already, click that subscribe button. Defending and guarding that subscribe button for many of you today is Bobby Wagner, middle linebacker of the Seattle Seahawks. So if you dare, get that cursor over the middle of the field, hit him with a slant route, maybe get behind the linebacker's zone coverage, and click that subscribe button and join the community as I'm bringing fantasy football content very often. And as we approach the fantasy football season, more and more will be coming out on the daily. Also, to remind all of you, I have started a Patreon. The link is down in the description for those of you who are interested. Not only will you get my fantasy football draft kit for 2019 that will update a couple times a week because of all the injuries and transactions that are made throughout the offseason, but you will get to play in a fantasy league with me. You get to ask questions and get answers very quickly in return. And much more, so go check that out. All the support is much appreciated, so thank you in advance. All right, hey everybody, how's it going? Okay, so we're talking about the preseason, and let me preface before we begin. I know many of you get excited about specific performances that may take place. I'm just looking at it from a basic standpoint of we have to understand that offenses and defenses are running vanilla schemes. They don't want to show their cards. And the fact of the matter is they're not going to. So if in fact the player is to have a great performance, sure, that's great. But against a fourth string defense in the late fourth quarter, that doesn't really present much value. It shows potential that he can play amongst some of the best in the world playing in the NFL. But at the end of the day, that kind of value we should, I guess, just rein in our opinions, okay? Let's just be careful. Let's not get too carried away as of right now on a couple of these players. But either way, I want to talk about all 16 games, and I'm going to be doing so. Obviously, some games, the starters didn't participate. So if there were really many standouts or takeaways from the game, I'm just going to tell you, and we're going to skip past it. So let's talk about Game 1 of the 16 different games that took place in Week 1 of the NFL preseason, excuse me. All right, number 1, we had the Jets versus the Giants. Now, obviously, there were starters. Saquon Barkley did not participate, but the biggest standouts were Daniel Jones on the side of the Giants and the Giants offensive line. So the entire offensive line did start and play. Daniel Jones did participate. Obviously, Eli came in through one pass, no big deal. On the very first drive. But Daniel Jones, he looked pretty good. The first round pick, 6th overall pick of the New York Giants, 5 for 5 passing, 67 yards, 1 passing touchdown. Really, a lot of that had to do with the fact that he just had so much time in the pocket, and that's why I wanted to bring up the offensive line. They look fantastic. Bringing in Kevin Zeitler, you've built a very good offensive line, to say the least. You have the left side of your offensive line with Will Hernandez and Nate Solder. You bring in Zeitler to, pretty much as the insurance on the right side of the line. You have experience at the right tackle and center position, so you're pretty much set. You're set there. Saquon Barkley is going to have a good season this year, without a doubt in my mind. Daniel Jones looked good. Obviously, there weren't many other starters out on the field, receiving-wise. You had like Russell Shepard and no big deal. But either way, all in all, for the couple drives that Daniel Jones played, looked decent. If he ends up becoming the starter for this team, it could potentially hurt value of other players depending on what he's going to produce and what he's going to bring. I know he's not as experienced as an Eli, but maybe some fresh blood into the organization might be the way they go. Other than that, hopping onto the other side of the field, the biggest standouts to me were Sam Darnold and Jamison Crowder, both of them specifically because of the fact that there was no Lev Bell, there was no Robbie Anderson. What we saw was Sam Darnold, he played well, almost threw an interception, but almost is not an interception at the end of the day. 4 for 5, 68 total passing yards, 1 passing touchdown to Jamison Crowder. Here's the thing about Jamison Crowder. When you talk about an Adam Gase-led offense, like he did last year with Miami, he used Kenny Stills and Danny Amendola in the slot position, and that's exactly why he brought in Jamison Crowder from the Washington Redskins to present that slot option for the team. They did have Quincy Enunwa last year, but chances are they're going to turn Enunwa into an outside receiver to play opposite of Robbie Anderson while they put Jamison Crowder in the slot and just allow Sam Darnold to find him as one of his favorite targets. On top of that, another thing that kind of stood out to me, even though Chris Herndon only had one reception, it was a big play, 32 yards. The thing that I wanted to kind of bring up, Chris Herndon is out with suspension for the first 4 games of the season. So for those of you who want to just avoid drafting a tight end and want to start tight ends as a streaming option, Chris Herndon, after week 4, after his suspension is concluded, he's a guy that probably I'll be talking about when it comes to waiver wires as a guy you might want to target, because from what he did last season at the back end of the year within this offense, he could potentially take another step forward and become a pretty decent contributor within that like top 15 tight end range. So I see Chris Herndon as a potential option going forward. But as of right now, Jamison Crowder in the slot. We saw Sam. Look, here's the thing about Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold is not a quarterback that's going to come out and just sling it and throw a 40-yard bomb and be happy with it. He's a quarterback that's young, that's improving, but needs time and needs to get into a rhythm. And the best way to get your young quarterback into a rhythm in games is to find a slot receiver, short yardage completions, to get their get more confidence within them, get them into that streak, and then start letting them get loose. Jamison Crowder is going to be the answer for this team going forward. There's even a report that I saw earlier today on I think it was Roto Experts, Roto World, one of those, that they were saying that Jamison Crowder, there's a potential he could see 100 receptions, maybe 100 targets, but 100 receptions, let's be honest, okay? All right, but anyway, other than that, no big takeaways. Honestly, there weren't many other starters playing. There's no Saquons, there's no Robbie Anderson, there's no Sterling Shepard, Golden Tate, or Lev Bell. So all in all, no big deal. Moving on to game 2, let's talk about the Colts versus the Bills. The biggest thing that I wanted to mention was obviously Josh Allen, because on the other side of the ball, the Colts didn't start anybody. Andrew Luck is ailing calf injury. T.Y. Hilton's not going to play. Eric Ebron, Jack Doyle, these guys are not going to see the field. Marlon Mack, you're not going to play them. So really, on the Colts side of the ball, nobody relevant played, at least for fantasy purposes. Devin Funchess played, but Devin Funchess is, as of right now, the wide receiver 2. So technically he has a little bit of value, but he caught a ball. No big deal. All in all, he was just there for the first drive, and he's done. Just getting used to the offense, I guess. Other than that, Josh Allen looked pretty good. Obviously, accuracy issues are still present. That is not anything that we should ignore. But then again, it's something that we're going to have to live with Josh Allen, especially when it comes to fantasy purposes. But outside of that, he played well. He was 6 for 11, passing, no touchdowns. But Zay Jones did drop a touchdown. Zay Jones wasn't in the end zone when he dropped it, but he was on the 1-yard line, caught it, or hit his hands at least, and then he dropped it once the defender made contact with him. So Josh Allen could have had a pretty good game against that Colts defense and secondary. All in all, he's a good quarterback, right? When I say good, I mean like he's serviceable. He showed he had the ability to move his legs, get a first down when the pocket collapsed and or the receiving options down the field weren't open. So again, he's not going to avoid that, similar to like a Lamar Jackson. So we know what we expect. All in all, nothing too big. The only thing that I wanted to take away was we've established what his starting receiving core is going to look like for those of you who are interested in maybe perhaps picking up a receiver on the Buffalo Bills. Zay Jones and John Brown are going to be the outsides, and Cole Beasley is going to be playing the slot. So that leaves guys like Robert Foster out, who were contributors last year, but John Brown's pretty much the better, more experienced version of said guy. So as of right now, I'd probably say that, John Brown, Zay Jones, Cole Beasley, pretty good. Cole Beasley might end up becoming his favorite target because of that slot option, but outside of that, nothing really popped out with the receiving core. Just a couple drives, no big deal. Outside of those guys, thinking off the top of my head, Devin Singletary. Here's the thing about the Bills' backfield. They have LaShawn McCoy. He didn't play. They have Frank Gore. Didn't play. And they have TJ Yeldon. Got a couple reps in. Outside of that, Devin Singletary, the rookie, is perhaps one of the more underrated rookies as of right now going into the season, and a guy that potentially could be a handcuff situation. But there are so much other running back talent within this backfield that I personally think that Devin Singletary is going to have to go a long way in order to see some playing time during the regular season. Now, he looked good. He was good in the passing game, good in the running game. He's a smaller statured running back, so obviously that kind of doesn't help him when it comes to his sustainability and health going forward. But all in all, I think he looked good. And as the future running back of this team, once LaShawn McCoy and Frank Gore are gone as of right now, he looked decent. So week one, that's an accomplishment. He got some good work there. Could have made some bigger runs, obviously, but it's all right. No big deal. Okay, moving on. Let's talk about the Falcons-Dolphins. Falcons did not start any of their starters. Freeman out, Julio out, all Mohamed Sanu, Ryan, Ridley, Hooper, all out. The only thing that we wanted to pick up from this Falcons-Dolphins game was the running back situation with the Dolphins, which we kind of got a better idea of. Kenyon Drake was a starter in the beginning, but as the game progressed, they got Kalen Ballage more integrated within the offense, and then eventually they got to the point where they were using two-back sets, even when Josh Rosen was in the game. But when they were using two-back sets, Kalen Ballage was pass blocking, and Kenyon Drake was going out for a route. So as of right now, they probably could use them both. But from what it looks like, Kenyon Drake is the starter. He did start the game. He did look good out there. So all in all, pretty good. Between the competition of Rosen and Fitzpatrick, it's a tricky one. I think at the by probably the fourth week, Fitzpatrick is going to flub the job like he does with every other starting position that he's been given over the last couple of years. Fitzpatrick, yes, he's been a quarterback that comes in and has some big games, boom or bust. Sometimes has the ability to throw many interceptions within one half, similar to Jameis Winston. That's why that quarterback competition went back and forth last season. But as of right now, Josh Rosen still needs a lot of help in terms of experience. The offensive weapons that surround him aren't great. But as of right now, I think Fitzpatrick's going to start the season, and eventually we'll get Rosen to eventually get into the starting role after Fitzmagic kind of wears off. All right, moving on to the Pats and the Lions. No Patriots started, no Lions started, or at least their starters started. It was pretty much a blank vanilla game with backups. Good old Bill Belichick coaching tree doing all the same things, no big deal. N'Keal Harry had 2 receptions for 36 yards, 2 great receptions, a nice comeback route, and a back shoulder fade that he went up and got. All of that surprisingly well, but the only issue was that he limped off the field early in the game, and he didn't return. So I don't know how significant the injury is. According to what I looked up, they did not disclose the injury. They said it wasn't a big deal, but we'll see. What I've noticed is that, funny enough, N'Keal Harry has changed his jersey number, a couple times this week. He was 50-something, which the Patriots do with all their rookies. They always give their rookies the number 50 until they kind of earn their stripes. And then he was number 10, which was Josh Gordon's number, and then they forced him to change the number to number 8. So outside looking in, is that a nod to Josh Gordon potentially getting reinstated? If that's the case, Josh Gordon, man, fantasy implication-wise, he's a guy that 100% can be the wide receiver 1 of this Patriots team. He looked good last year playing and could potentially, if he gets back, be another good contributor to this offense. All right, moving on to another game. We'll talk about the Ravens and the Jaguars. Jaguars, no starters. No Fournette, no Foles, no D.D. Westbrook, no big deal, okay? Let's talk about the Ravens. Lamar Jackson. Even though the stat sheet is going to say 4 for 6 and a touchdown, that wasn't the case. He was really like 4 for 9. There was 3 consecutive plays in which there were penalties, and they were awful accuracy plays by Lamar Jackson. He overthrew receivers and underthrew receivers so badly to the point where I was like, oh my goodness, has he improved? How long of an offseason has he had? Short yardage is not a big deal, but when we're talking about 15 yards down the field, that's where Lamar Jackson begins to struggle a little bit. Sometimes he's throwing across his body, across the field. It's just there's some bad decision making there that's going to have to improve. He didn't run the ball, which was surprising, but maybe that's the whole thing. He didn't want to run the ball because he didn't have to. He doesn't want to force an injury that could potentially, miss the entire season because of a preseason game. So as of right now, majority of what he did just sat in the pocket, targeted Willie Snead, got a touchdown there on a pick route. Similar, almost, I think it was the identical route to where Jamison Crowder scored. Always, you're going to get that slot receiver, you're going to pick and find him in the end zone because he's just going to pretty much walk in as soon as the second corner is not really paying attention and too preoccupied with the first receiver setting the pick. So all in all there, Willie Snead is probably one of his more intriguing targets, I guess. But even then, at the last 7 games of the 2018 season, he didn't really target Willie Snead much. He didn't really target Mark Andrews much. He didn't really pass the ball much. That being said, the other receiving options, Marquise Brown is not fully healthy to participate in preseason games, but Miles Boykin, another rookie wide receiver that has gotten some hype moving towards him. A couple people said he's looked like Michael Thomas, a big, tall receiver, good catching range. He caught a touchdown in that game. I think with the second team during the second quarter, but it was called back due to a holding call, but he's looked good all in all. So he would have finished with like 5 receptions, 65 yards, and a touchdown, but instead he didn't because of that holding call. Boykin, he could potentially end up being a contributor to this offense, but looking at what they have at the receiving position, unless it's a guy that's going to be able to go up in double coverage contested catches with an inaccurate pass, it's really going to be a mess at the wide receiver position. Nothing fantasy-wise that's intriguing enough for me to say we should pay attention to it at a greater extent as of right now. Outside of that, we're still talking about the Ravens. Justice Hill came into the game. He is soon going to be the number 2 running back of this team, potentially the number 1 running back. Gus Edwards is going to be replaced. Kenneth Dixon might get cut. Justice Hill is a great running back. He looked good on the ground, through the air, a great lateral movement. On top of that, the really big thing that many of you might not know is that Justice Hill, when he was a sophomore at Oklahoma State, he played over Chris Carson. Yes, the Chris Carson of the Seattle Seahawks. So in those last 3 years, from a sophomore, junior, senior, while he was at Oklahoma State, the guy ran for 1,000 yards every season. So he's got some experience under his belt. He's a guy that's going to come in and hopefully contribute soon. But he'll probably end up being the RB2 of that team, by the middle of the season, which for Ravens, that's a good contributor. That's a guy that's going to touch the ball 8 times a game, potentially. Either way. Let's go ahead and move on. Let's talk about the Browns and the Redskins. Redskins, there's nothing I want to talk about. They were awful. Haskins looked, he did not look great, plain and simple. Against the second defense of the Browns, he multiple turnovers, nothing to look happy about potentially. I know there's a 3-way competition between him, Keenum, and Colt McCoy. Really, it's going to end up being a competition because Haskins did not look great. The biggest takeaways from that game was the Browns offense. Like we've all been waiting, we've all been anticipating. The Browns offense looked great. Baker Mayfield led the team. They started the game with a 2-minute drill. In 3 minutes, they scored the ball with no Jarvis Landry or Odell Beckham. They did have the starting offensive line, the backup receivers, Baker and Chubb and Njoku. So besides the receivers that were backups, they still were able to take the ball and force it down the field against the first defense of the Redskins, and they played well. All in all, the biggest takeaway of that game is Rashad Higgins, due to the fact that Antonio Callaway will be suspended for the first 4 games because of substance abuse policy of the NFL. Rashad Higgins is going to be the number 3 receiver of that team. And he played well. He had 5 receptions, 98 receiving yards, and a touchdown. So I think with the comfort of catching balls from Baker Mayfield and then getting more opportunity as the season progresses, he's gonna potentially be a fantasy contributor or asset that if in fact Odell Beckham is to have another injury, Rashad Higgins is the guy to step up and pick up the leftovers there. On top of it, the only other thing that kind of popped out to me, Nick Chubb was using the passing game, thank you, but also Hilliard was another running back that came in and got some reps. The whole thing about Hilliard is that they forced the ball to him twice. So 3 consecutive plays, they threw the ball to the running back out of the backfield, which is hilarious because that's pretty much a jab at Duke Johnson saying, like, you wanted to leave, we got you out of here, and guess what? We really didn't even need you. So I thought that was funny. Other than that, really just it was a dismantling The Browns on all three sides of the football, which was offense, defense, and special teams, with Sheehy Giuseppe taking that punt return back. All in all, I mean, it was a beatdown, and it didn't look pretty for Redskins. Moving on, Titans and Eagles. The biggest takeaway of this game is Adam Humphries, plain and simple. Adam Humphries is a guy that I've been talking about since the beginning of this offseason. And I had a lot of confidence in a couple months ago. And for some reason, because of how much everyone else faded Adam Humphries, I started to quiet myself. You can even go back to like the first couple, mock drafts that I did this offseason. Adam Humphries is on every single one of my team as my wide receiver 3. The amount that he was targeted by Marcus Mariota. Marcus Mariota ended the game with 4 completions on 9 passing. Hold on, there's something in my lip. I'm trying to get it out. Anyway, on 9 passing attempts. 4 completions, 9 passing attempts. All 4 completions were to Adam Humphries, and 8 of those targets were to Adam Humphries. Or I think it was 7 targets. If I'm maybe being overzealous. I think it was 7 targets. He literally only threw the ball to Adam Humphries. It was on 3rd down, 1st down. So it didn't matter. There was no Corey Davis out there, I understand. There was no A.J. Brown. There was no Delaney Walker. But feeding the ball primarily and only to Adam Humphries, in my eyes, that's exactly what they brought him in for. He's one of the best slot receivers in the NFL for a reason last season. And hopefully they're going to feed him the ball. In a PPR format, the guy can have some great fantasy value. And from what I see as of right now, where he's being drafted ADP-wise, he's a potential steal. Let's see. Moving on. The Eagles, they didn't even give Miles Sanders many attempts. Outside of practice, we haven't seen much of Miles Sanders. Excuse me. So everything else was backups. They did not play any starters. Even the tight end position was backup. So no takeaways from the Eagles offense or defense there. Moving on to the next game between the Packers and Houston Texans. No starters there as well. So we're going to skip on that. The only thing I wanted to take away from that is Jake Kumerow. Kumerow was a guy that even last season we were hearing noise about because there was a relationship between him and Aaron Rodgers and potentially him being like the next Jordy Nelson, blah, blah, blah. As of right now, Jake Kumerow had a couple receptions here and there. I'm not buying too much into him. He's a guy that would literally not even go in 14-team leagues. He's a guy that really is just the deepest sleeper you could possibly find. So as of right now, just listen out for Jake Kumerow, because if Allison or Scantling goes down, Kumerow could see some time this year. Moving on to the Bears and the Panthers. David Montgomery, Mike Davis were the only 2 standouts. Why? Because the Panthers didn't start any starters, and the Bears, outside of Mitchell Trubisky handing off the ball, didn't do anything in the passing game. Tariq Cohen did not participate, so it was really just a competition between the 2 running backs. Mike Davis started the game, looked good. To be honest, Mike Davis should have had more rushing yards than he did. I think he had 3 rushes for like 9 yards. He should have had way more. There was a play when I was watching the game that even Mitchell Trubisky on 3rd and 1, he optioned the wrong side. So typically, you want to face the defensive end that you're optioning. He completely looked to the wrong side. I think maybe even the back was lined up on. Yeah, the back was even lined up on the wrong side. So there was a big mistake there. I was like, oh my God, we're making these kind of mistakes, and that's supposed to be the starting running back and quarterback. I was like, that's a rough. So either way, Mike Davis, David Montgomery, that's going to be a competition. There's a potential that perhaps we're drafting David Montgomery a little too early currently in our drafts, and that could bite us in the ass if in fact David Montgomery doesn't end up being the starter week 1. The things that we saw from David Montgomery, he found the end zone. He was great in the passing game, 3 receptions, 30 yards. Outside of that, really just you're playing against a second string defense. No big takeaways except for the fact that we know that he's a versatile enough back to fend for himself in the passing game, but so is Mike Davis. He did that for the entirety of last season with the Seahawks. So we've got an RBBC potentially on our hands with the Chicago backfield, which scares me. But maybe we should start fading some of that value around Tariq Cohen and David Montgomery and really just start balancing it out, because potentially we could get an RBBC out of that backfield from Nagy. All right, outside of that, Nothing much from that Bears-Panthers game. Moving on to the Chargers and Cardinals, Mr. Thumbnail himself, Austin Eckler, played well. Him and Justin Jackson, both of the backups of the Chargers, played well. And to be honest, that's great. Confidence-wise, building those running backs' confidence. I know they've got great experience. Both of them played last season. 2 years for Eckler. I know Justin Jackson was a rookie last year, but he got his fair share of reps last year when Gordon was down, and he played well. So all in all, the two of them, they're probably going to have like a 70-30, 65-40, 60-40 split, whether it's on the ground or through the air. Both of them can participate if Melvin Gordon does not return. If he does, Justin Jackson, you're relegated to the third string running back, and Eckler's got 150 touches on the season. But as of right now, I thought they both look good, and against the starting Cardinals defense, maybe we don't need to sign Melvin Gordon. Maybe just trade him. I don't know. We'll see. The other side of the ball, the biggest takeaway, obviously, we wanted to see what Kyler Murray was capable of doing. Looked great. Again, against the starting, it wasn't really the full starters of the Chargers defense, but enough of it to where you can get a decent look at him. 6 for 7 passing, 44 passing yards. Targeted Keyshawn Johnson, who's been really his go-to receiver throughout all of training camp. Reports always have been saying that Keyshawn Johnson is the guy that he's loved throwing the ball to in training camp. But the thing is, when you have Christian Kirk, Larry Fitzgerald, and Michael Crabtree in that offense, are you going to find Keyshawn Johnson on the field during the regular season? I don't know. So maybe we should start dialing a little bit back on that, but we'll see. Moving on, Broncos and the Seahawks. Okay, Phillip Lindsay is the RB1. That is a given. On this Broncos team, he is the leading running back. Now, Royce Freeman may have filled up the stat sheets. When I say fill up the stat sheets, there was a 3rd and 1 play, 3rd and 1, where Royce Freeman ran through the I don't even understand how it happens. They ran ISO. Literally, they had a fullback lead, and there was no linebacker in the gap. And Royce Freeman broke out a 40-yard run. Okay, great. Royce Freeman had a 40-yard run. No big deal. Everybody relax. Literally, it was a blown assignment. We shouldn't blow Royce Freeman out of proportions. I don't know why. Phillip Lindsay is being talked about having, all of his touches garnished or taken away by Royce Freeman this offseason. Let's relax, okay? Lindsay's still the RB1 of this team. He's the better receiving back. Theo Riddick, who was brought into the organization, broke his arm or shoulder, something. He did something bad where he's out for 8 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks. So Theo Riddick's pretty much gone. Devontae Booker's still a receiving back there, but I think we need to relax with the Royce Freeman Lindsay news going back and forth every single day. Other than that, Broncos offensive line looked pretty good. The Broncos offensive line, which is a sneaky good offensive line, they're gonna pound teams this year. So whoever's in that running back spot, you want them. I think it's going to be Lindsay for majority of the time. Obviously, similar to last season, we feed the ball to Royce Freeman here and there, short yardage situations like they did 3rd and 1. But Lindsay's the guy to really go after. But at his ADP, maybe a little too expensive. But really, what is he coming off? Like RB24 or something? Like it's cheap almost. For a guy that finished in the top 12, that's cheap. All right, moving on. Buccaneers and Steelers. Jameis Winston plus Chris Godwin equals touchdown. That's what we learned. As advertised, like Bruce Arians has been talking about all season long, they've just reaffirmed the advertisement that they had for him. So they confirmed that, hey, this is real. Even with Mike Evans on the floor, yeah, Chris Godwin's going to get the receptions and the targets in the red zone. So great. On top of that, what else did they confirm? Peyton Barber over Ronald Jones. They're going with Peyton Barber. Ronald Jones got like a couple carries in the first drive there, but really it was Peyton Barber dominating the snaps, even going out for routes. So Peyton Barber over Ronald Jones going forward until otherwise noted. On the other side of the ball, James Washington, who was drafted to be the number 3 wide receiver of the Pittsburgh Steelers, had a pretty good game himself. No other starters participated for the Steelers, but he had a good game. a standout game, I guess you could say, something that he needed. A lot of his confidence was lost last year because he wasn't able to perform or contribute very often. Ben Roethlisberger and him really butted heads to a point where Roethlisberger just made it so where he was inactive for a lot of the back end of that season. So hopefully this will bring James Washington some confidence, get him into this lineup, potentially be this team's number 3 wide receiver because they're going to need it. I don't know how long Moncrief is going to last as the number 2, but James Washington could potentially be that guy if he can turn it around and put some games together here. Moving on to the Vikings and Saints. Biggest takeaway. Without Dalvin Cook and Stephon Diggs, this Vikings offense looked good against the Saints. They moved the ball well. The offensive line protected to an extent. Offensive line still needs some help going forward, which is definitely going to hurt Kirk Cousins because he can't help but fumble the ball 10 times a year for the last 4 years. That is an actual stat. But overall, the offense looked good. On the other side of the ball, all the starters were present except for Drew Brees. They played Teddy Bridgewater. The only big takeaway there was Latavius Murray. He's probably going to fill into that Mark Ingram role. He's going to get the ball 10 to 12 times a game. So for where he's being valued right now, I think he's being extremely undervalued. If in fact Mark Ingram was to play, Mark Ingram played 12 games last year. If he was going to play all 16 games in 2018 with the averages that he was, putting up, he would have been a top 24 running back. So there's a potential that Latavius Murray within this offense, especially he caught 2 passes, man. That's insane for Latavius Murray. There's always a chance that Murray could be a pretty good contributor here as a guy that's going to split in this 2-headed monster backfield. We could see something out of him. Moving on to the Rams-Raiders. No starters played. No takeaways from this one. The only news that I've heard as of late is that perhaps Darrell Henderson isn't the number 2 running back on this team. They have John Kelly and Malcolm Brown. The news that I heard was that Henderson could potentially be the number 4 running back on this depth chart. So other than that, no big takeaways. Moving on, the last 2 games that I wanted to mention. We have the Bengals versus the Chiefs. Now, this is where I want to state my claim and make sure that everyone understands. I am in on the Bengals. Now, you may be thinking, Andrew, you're crazy. Let's just look at what happened against the Chiefs. Against the Chiefs starting defense with no A.J. Green and no Joe Mixon, okay? We had Andy Dalton, who was pressured 0 times by the defensive line of the Chiefs. Yes, with Chris Jones and Frank Clark. Was pressured 0 times with a 4-man defensive line pass rush. Moved the ball down the field consistently. Targeted and gave Tyler Boyd 3 receptions for 25 yards. And on top of it, capped the drive off with a passing touchdown against the Kansas City Chiefs defense. Someone tell me why Andy Dalton went 7 for 9 for 80 yards and a touchdown if, in fact, his offensive line is complete garbage. Someone explain this to me. Because I've been literally saying it for weeks, and I've been drafting the Bengals. Why? Because they keep dropping. Why are people sleeping on the Bengals? This offensive line is not going to completely kill this team. They are professional football players. They are in the National Football League. They are some of the best offensive linemen in the world because they are there to do a job. They're paid millions of dollars to do that job. They're going to get it done. Sure, if you're going to go against Aaron Donald, you're going to have trouble. But Chris Jones and Frank Clark are great defensive linemen. They're Pro Bowlers, for God's sake. And the Bengals offensive line, who is supposed to be completely destroyed and dismantled, they held their own, plain and simple. Just saying. Am I taking it out of context? Well, last time I checked, if you can hold a defensive pass rush and cause 0 pressures, I'm happy with it. Moving on. Let's talk about the Chiefs. Mahomes looked great. Kelsey looked great. Is that all? Yeah, pretty much. Because Kelsey caught 1 pass, 30-some-odd yards. Mahomes was 100% completion percentage, 10 yards rushing. They capped off the drive with Carlos Hyde getting in the end zone. Really, the questions of an RBBC are starting to loom. Darwin Thompson starting to get more hype, maybe a little too much. But at the current stage of this entire backfield, with Damian Williams still being hurt, Carlos Hyde getting a lot of reps in practice, looking good, and Darwin Thompson having a great performance, this could potentially turn into a running back by committee. I see Damian Williams just completely dropping in drafts as of late or going into the future. and it's going to kill his stock and potentially, I don't know, make him. I don't know if his stock drop is going to, turn out in him becoming a starter again and running this back. I think they actually might go with an RBBC. Andy Reid came out and said that they're going to run with a committee. If that's not enough, then I don't know what is. So let's talk about the last game that I wanted to mention today, so I can go and relax, try to finish that fantasy draft kit. By the way, I'm updating my fantasy draft kit for those of you who are on the Patreon. If you haven't joined the Patreon yet, go check it out. Draft kits there, 130 player profiles. I got my rankings by tier, by position. I got to finish up my flex rankings, top 200 players. But either way, go check that out if you're interested. Also, if you have questions that you're going to post in the comment section, chances are I'm probably not going to answer them if they're fantasy football related, because I'm technically only answering questions to people that are supporters on Patreon. Why? Really quickly, last season, I spent about 8 hours every week just answering questions. I can make so much more video content in that amount of time, and there's so much, there's so much trash in that comment section, whether it's people being toxic or, X, Y, or Z. I don't even want to tell you how bad people are sometimes in there. So, to be honest, I'd rather just answer questions for my supporters, because it's going to save me time. And really, it's not going to melt my brain because of some of the things that I see in there. Okay, moving on. The last game, Cowboys versus 49ers. Any takeaways from the Cowboys? No, except for the fact that Darius Jackson right now is the RB1 with Tony Pollard as the RB2. Their combination going forward, if in fact they don't start or sign Ezekiel Elliott, is the way to go. Outside of that, the 49ers, any starters? No. No Pettis, no Kittle, no Garoppolo, no Tevin Coleman, no Breida. Really big news. Trent Taylor out for the season with an injury, and Jerick McKinnon is going to start the season on the injured reserve. So the backfield of Coleman and Breida, that's going to be a fantasy jackpot. I'm not kidding, because of how well the backfield works for the 49ers over the past couple of years. So either way, or at least for Kyle Shanahan offense, is plain and simple. I remember Kyle Shanahan used to do something for the Falcons in which he used two running backs and torched the league. So we could see that. Anyway, that's pretty much it. That's week 1 of the preseason. Those are my standouts. Those are the guys that kind of popped off screen as of right now. Nothing too big, nothing too major, but good progression. That's all I can say for now. Until tomorrow, thank you everybody for watching. If you like this video, click the like button below. And until next time, I'll see you guys later. Peace.